Hey everyone, and welcome back to my channel. Today I am going to be reviewing Warbreaker by Brandon Sanderson. Warbreaker is my fifth full-length Sanderson novel, so I'm finally kind of getting more into his work. I also did read The Hope of Elantris and The Emperor's Soul, so those are two shorter works. So in total now, 7 of his books. So that's kind of exciting. I'm trying to read it all this year, so I think I'm setting a pretty decent pace. But what is Warbreaker about? So Warbreaker, we follow two princesses, mostly, Ciri and Vivenna. Vivenna is supposed to go off and marry a neighboring country who's kind of antagonistic towards her country, and she is supposed to marry their god king. Ciri is kind of the younger sister who just kind of is very whimsical, does what she wants. They're very different, very different. Vivenna has been training her whole life to go and be a part of this marriage and kind of hopefully set peace between the two countries because, like I said, they're very antagonistic, and Ciri has just kind of been a goof off and kind of goes and does whatever she wants. And on the day or week, something like that, that Vivenna is supposed to be sent to the God King to be married. The king changes his mind, not the God King, but their father, changes his mind, decides he cannot send Vivenna, that she is too valuable to the kingdom, and he decides to instead send Ciri to marry the God King. Now, in the thumbnail of this video, I said, is this better than Mistborn? And before I can answer that question, let's go ahead and talk about what is good about this and what is bad about this book. So I think the characters are really strong in this book. I'm going to mention 3 or 4 different ones here, and these are all going to be good. The dynamic that we see between Vivenna and Ciri is really fascinating. I really feel like Sanderson was trying to play with kind of like a duality, role switching kind of thing going on here. Like I said, you have Vivenna, who's this very proper and has been trained to be this kind of royal essence, and Ciri didn't get that. And as this story goes on, you kind of see those roles changing and reversing, and just kind of the different circumstances they're in. That aspect of those characters is really fascinating. I really enjoyed that. Vivenna herself was a little bit frustrating in certain parts of the book, but the trials and tribulations that she goes through really changes her as a character. And anytime you can have a character grow from being something on one extreme all the way to another extreme is always just really well done character work. And Sanderson does a really good job doing that with Vivenna. Ciri, on the other hand, very different set of circumstances. And while she doesn't change as much as Vivenna, I would say she definitely does evolve as a character, but the circumstances she is put in throughout this story with a lot of political maneuvering that she doesn't have training for, she doesn't know how to act, very much a fish out of water kind of character. It's just great to see how she interacts with all these gods and, priests and the religion that's going on in the realm the kingdom she's sent to. I've mentioned the God King a couple different times. Maybe I should explain a little bit more of that. The country that Ciri is sent to has what they call the God King. There's a magic system in this world where they have breasts, and the more breasts you have, the more power you have. And she is sent to their king, who has the most breasts, is extremely powerful. He is a very fascinating character. I will keep this completely spoiler-free, but the things that go on around and involving the God King, Sebron, is just really creative. It got me off guard. I really had my thoughts going one way, and when Sanderson kind of has the reveal for this character and what's going on, I completely did not see that option coming. That wasn't something that came way out of left field. Wasn't ready for that. So Sebron, the God King, very interesting character, definitely another good part. And really, a lot of the good for this book is the character work that happens. The last character is a god, another god in the story, and that's going to be Lightsong. Lightsong is the stereotypical doesn't want to care, but is actually doing the right thing the whole time. Kind of a common character trope throughout literature. I think I see it a lot more in TV than I do in books. But he's the happy-go-lucky, not trying too hard, but is still like looked up to kind of person. And the revelations we get for him at the very end of this book, kind of the climax, like I said, I won't spoil anything, was just awesome. That was just kind of one of the moments that I think is really going to stick with me from this book. And that's something with books that shining moments really like propel a book forward for me, and his last not his last moment, but his moment that he has was awesome. The last thing I'll mention in the good section is the cultural clash / religions that are going on inside of this book. I keep saying that there's a god king, and not everybody thinks he's a god, or that the gods in the kingdom are gods. And seeing that cultural clash between where Ciri and Vivenna are from and where they're sent to is just awesome. I'm always a sucker for different cultural identities and religions and things like that in books. I think there's a lot that can be done with that, and those mixing of worlds just opens up to a large variety of things that can be done. It gives it that sense of realism. If you've traveled a lot or have been exposed to a lot of different cultures in the real world, you can see how different something is. Something can be so taboo in one place and completely okay in another place. A big one that gets thrown around is like violence in the United States isn't seen as, especially in like video games and media, as a very normal thing, and then in other places it isn't. And then you can take things like nudity in other places isn't seen, especially in like certain European regions, isn't as big of a deal, and then you come to the States and it's very taboo. And anytime you can get those kind of cultural blendings happening in a story, it's just always up my alley. I always really enjoy that, and this book did a really good job showing why certain cultural areas and regions would have issues with others, and kind of how that all mixes together. And so that was a huge positive for me as well. Now let's move on to the bads. And for the first time ever, I think, in a Sanderson book, I am going to mention the magic system or the magic of the world as being a negative. I just didn't really care. I didn't think it was all that interesting. It was used creatively, but I don't think we got enough of it being used creatively for me to really care. I really think that this is much more of a character study than anything that has to do with magic, which is very different coming from the other works I've read from Sanderson, where magic is basically the foundation that the world is built upon. And I didn't feel that way in Warbreaker like I did in Mistborn specifically. I really felt like without the magic system, that whole world is just completely different and, not the same story. And I really feel like you could have taken a big chunks of this magic system out and it wouldn't have changed that much. So I have to count that as a negative. I don't know, the way it's presented in the story and the value you're given based on how much of this magic you have. There were some interesting things done with that, but like the magic itself it didn't feel special. And I don't know why, but it obviously affected the world greatly, and there are things that, the story doesn't happen without the magic. It didn't have that same specialness that I had kind of become accustomed to from Sanderson. So it is probably the first and last time I'll say that about a Sanderson book, I hope. I think he's normally, well known for his magic systems and how thought out and well done they are, and this one was just lacking for me. So I've talked a lot about characters and how well done they are and all of the cultural stuff, and this is just a character study. And one negative is actually going to be the lack or they just weren't in it enough. Two characters, Nightblood and Vasher. I think that the story could have used a little bit more of both of those characters, especially early on. They get a little bit more of a prominent role towards the latter half of the book, but I really think that they could have been used to, one, have a little bit of more levity in the book, and I just really thought that Nightblood specifically was such an interesting concept that I would have liked more of it. So unfortunately, as well done as most of the characters are, and Vasher is actually a very well done character, I just wanted more of it, and so I'm going to have to count that as a negative that I didn't get that out of the story, even though there are some great moments with those two characters. One problem I think this story struggles with is the twists. There's a lot of like misdirections happening in this story, and it got to the point where it was happening so much that it almost became obvious that it was going to happen. It was almost like, because it happened so much, something that would have been a pretty big reveal felt very obvious because it was just kind of like misdirection multiple times. And by the end of it, when we're getting kind of to the last like twist of the story, I'm just like, yeah, I saw it coming from like so far away at this point, because you had set me up so many times to get twisted, to point me in one way and then to all of a sudden shift it to another way, which is fine. I don't mind having twists in book. I think they're normally generally a good thing, but it was just a little overdone. in this story, I think, if we had cut one or two of them out, it would have made it a better story, or at least had made it less predictable. I don't normally go out of my way to try and predict things or know what's going on further into a book. I'm definitely more of I'm gonna just enjoy the story as it comes to me. I'm not really a thoughter, planner, trying to figure out every twist and turn, but in this story it just made it super easy. And so I kind of would have preferred maybe, I don't know, maybe it needed to be done in a different way, but by the end of the story I just kind of knew everything that I thought was going to happen one way was going to happen another way. So that kind of ruined the ending of this book a little bit for me. Lastly, I will mention the ending. Sanderson, I've always heard about the Sanderlanche, that the end of his books are explosive. So much happens, everything all at once. And the ending of this book definitely was that. But I also felt like it kind of was a little rushed. I definitely could have sat and marinated with the things that are going on a little bit more. I feel like so much happened at the end of the book, and we didn't really get that last bit after the climax of where we kind of settle the board. And so much of it happened, and some of it happens off screen that I would have liked to have seen. So, it's hard to say that I want a long book to be longer, or maybe, another book. It's hard to say a whole nother book to just, develop the ending of this. But I think a couple hundred, maybe 150 more pages at the end of this book to kind of fill out everything that's happening and maybe give a little bit more closure to some of the things that happened would have been better. I think the ending left me a little bit wanting, which is fine. I know there's apparently is supposed to be some kind of sequel to this, even though it might not be a direct sequel, which would kind of make me a little sad. I would want to kind of continue what we got at the end of the story. But yeah, the ending of this book I think was a little weak. It was so much at once that it's very exciting. I was enjoying the ride, but it's the ride ended so abruptly that I wanted more. I needed another loop on the roller coaster or something. It just left me wanting. So that is my last negative. So my overall last thoughts is no. I do not think that this is better than Mistborn Era 1. There for a little bit early on, I was really questioning it. I really was enjoying this book. And like I said, unfortunately, it wavered a little bit at the end for me. Overall, though, this is a really enjoyable read. I did end up giving it 4 stars, so I really did like it. I think it is a great place to start if you want to skip Mistborn or Elantris. I think this is a better standalone than Elantris to kind of jump into Sanderson's work, and if you don't want to commit to a trilogy that is Mistborn, I think this is a much, much better starting point than Elantris, which kind of gets thrown around as a suggestion. But that is all I have to say about Warbreaker. Once again, a solid 4-star book that I really enjoyed. Leave a comment down below if you want to talk about it. If you have anything to say, I'll be down there to discuss with anybody who wants to, and I hope you have a good one.